Hey guys, welcome to English Bootcamp week 3. So this week we're focusing on writing. The last couple weeks you did grammar and punctuation, and now we're going to put it together. So I'll just pull up the document here. All right, there we go. So the first thing we're going to talk about is answering questions in complete sentences. And this might seem like something that's super basic, but for people who've been out of school for a while, it's a good reminder. And I get a lot of students who will come into adulthood and forget this skill. So what does it mean to answer a question in a complete sentence? It means you answer using actually many of the same words in the original question. And that might seem redundant, but you have to imagine that the reader doesn't see the question and they should still be able to understand what you're saying. So avoid one-word answers for sure, and avoid sentence fragments, so pieces of a sentence. So the sentence needs to include a subject and a verb and the whole thing. So here's an example. How would you describe Tom's relationship with his mother? I want to say that it's loving, but I'm not just going to write the word loving, because if someone saw your answer without the question, they wouldn't understand what you're talking about. So you find the words in the sentence, in the question, and then you change it. So I would describe Tom's relationship with his mother as loving. Okay, not a complete sentence would just be saying loving. Here's another example. What does Miles's decision not to gossip about the new student demonstrate about Miles? The answer you want to give is a willingness to stand alone. But I need to find the part of the question I'm going to reuse. So Miles's decision not to gossip about the new student, I'm going to start with that. I'll say, Miles's decision not to gossip about the new student demonstrates his willingness to stand alone. So it might be useful to underline the words in the question that you're going to reuse to make a complete sentence. And again, the sentence fragment or not a complete sentence would be just saying willingness to stand alone. Because if as a teacher I looked at that and I didn't have the question in front of me, I would have no idea what you're talking about. Okay, here's an example. Do you agree with Sophie's decision to join the volleyball team? Yes, you do. But instead of just saying yes, you have to say, yes, I agree with Sophie's decision to join the volleyball team. And again, not a complete sentence, would just be saying yes. Okay, here's a fourth example. Why did Olivia fall asleep at the kitchen table? The answer you want to give is she stayed up late studying for her math test. But I need to put that together. Since it's a why question, I need the word because in there. So Olivia fell asleep at the kitchen table because she stayed up late studying for her math test. All right. So that was answering in complete sentences. You guys can pause the video here if you want to work on that assignment. Otherwise, we're going to go on to a larger topic here, which is creating a 6-sentence paragraph. So a paragraph is a group of sentences that all have the same subject. So when we're writing a longer document or essay, we don't want to just write the whole thing down in one big block, because as the reader, it's hard to see the different ideas or to go back and find them. So you indent each section into a paragraph, and each paragraph should have one topic. So what I'm going to show you today is the 6-sentence paragraph. We're going to start with a topic sentence that will tell what the paragraph is going to be about. Then we'll add 4 details, and then we'll have a concluding sentence, which basically just repeats the topic sentence in fresh words. Okay, so it's sort of like a sandwich. We have the topic sentence, detail, 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 concluding sentence. Okay, so for your assignment, you guys get to choose one of these topics, or if there's another great topic you have, you can do that. But here's some ideas: your first job, having your first child, tsunami preparedness, your dream vacation, buying a vehicle, climate change, someone you admire, living in a rural area, and residential schools. So for this assignment, you don't have to do any research. Write about something you already know about, because we're focusing on the writing, not the content as much. So the first step then is to plan. So here, I'm not going to write full sentences. I'm just going to use point form. I'm going to take what's inside my head and dump it out onto the paper. So I've decided to tell you about my first job, and I hated it. Then I'm going to give some details. So it was at a swimming pool concession. That's one detail. I worked by myself and there was too much to do for one person. The third detail is that there were rude, hungry children wanting to buy food from me. And the fourth detail is that I smelled like a deep fryer. So all of these details support that initial idea. They're all about my first job and why I hated it. So my concluding sentence is again that I hated my first job. But here I'm going to go one step further and say, but it made my second job seem easy in comparison. So if you guys want, you can stop right now, work on your plan for your paragraph. Okay, the next step then is to write the draft. So I'm just going to take these ideas and turn them into sentences, one sentence for each of those ideas. So I got my very first job at age 18. And I hated it. I worked at a swimming pool concession. It was a difficult job because there was only one worker at a time and there was a lot to do. Many of my customers were rude, hungry children. After each shift, I smelled like a deep fryer. It's true, I hated my first job, but at least it made my next job seem easy in comparison. So again, I'm not really worrying too much about the style yet. I'm just turning these ideas into sentences. And unfortunately, this is where a lot of people stop when they write. They write the first draft and they never revise it. So we're going to take this as like a good skeleton. This is maybe like C+ level, complete sentences. It's on topic, but I'm not really using any fancy literary devices or good vocabulary, right? So pause right now. Do your first draft just to get those ideas into complete sentences on paper, and then we'll talk about how to revise. All right, so when we're revising our work, I'm going to show you 6 different tricks, and I want you to use one for each of the sentences in your writing. You don't have to do it in order, just choose what would work for each sentence. Okay, so we're going to dress it up. The first thing I'm going to talk about is using a strong verb. The second thing is adding an adverb, an ly word. The third thing I'm going to talk about is adding the word because. The fourth thing is adding who or which. The fifth thing is adding a quality adjective, a describing word. And the sixth thing is telling when, while, or where. So all of those are great skills. I'm going to go over them one at a time for you. So first off, using a strong verb. A verb is an action word. So here we go. So here's the original. My first sentence, I got my very first job at age 18 and I hated it. So in red, you can see the verbs. One is got and the other is hated. So I'm going to try to think up some stronger words I can use for those words. I can either just think in my head, or you can go to thesaurus.com and it'll give you some other options. So let's see. Okay, another word for got is obtained. I obtained my very first job at age 18. And instead of the word hate, I've looked up an even stronger word for that, which is loathe. And I loathed it. And you can see, because it's a strong word, I've decided to add an exclamation mark at the end. So I obtained my very first job at age 18 and I loathed it, exclamation mark. Okay, the next strategy we're going to talk about is adding an adverb. So an adverb is a word that describes a verb. Usually it ends in ly, like quickly, happily, supposedly, joyfully. Okay, some more examples: fortunately, sadly, slowly. So let's see. Here I worked at a swimming pool concession. So I need to add an adverb. How did I work? I could say I worked hard. Let's see, what else could I say? Sorry, I'll turn the sound off my computer there. I worked arduously. That's another word for really hard. I worked so hard. It was hard work. I worked arduously at the swimming pool concession. That really gives a bit more oomph to the sentence. Okay, our third strategy is to mix up the sentence structure. So instead of always starting with, the subject and the verb, I'm going to start with the word because. So I'm going to swap the order of the sentence. So we're going to open with a dependent clause to change things up a little bit, because it makes writing more interesting when we mix up the sentence structure. So start with the word because, or even though, although, however. Any of those words are great words to start a sentence with. So I already have the word because in one of my sentences. I say, it was a difficult job because there was only one worker at a time and there was a lot to do. And just to make it a little different, I'm going to swap those two. I'm going to say, because there was only one worker at a time, there was a lot of work to do. So just swapping that sentence structure makes it more interesting to read. Okay, the fourth strategy is to add detail with the word who or which. So for example, Larissa, who is my very best friend, was my maid of honor. This is sort of like the appositive that we talked about last week, adding some detail. Another example, the car, which was nothing more than a beat up old rust bucket, managed to survive for another 3 years. So if it's a person we're describing, we'll use the word who. If it's a thing we're describing, we'll add the word which. So let's look at my sentence. I said, many of my customers were rude, hungry children. Oh, and I'm going to have fun by adding some details about these terrible children. I'll say, many of my customers were rude, hungry children who had been let loose on the swimming pool without adult supervision. So that added quite a bit of detail to that sentence. Okay, the fifth strategy is to add a quality adjective. An adjective is a describing word that describes a noun. Okay, so examples are enormous, starving, elegant, surprising, dainty, purple. Any of those are all adjectives. So let's see. Here's my original sentence. After each shift, I smelled like a deep fryer. So you can see in orange the nouns. Those are the words that I'm going to try to describe. So what was my shift like? And I smelled like what kind of deep fryer? So let's see. After each seemingly endless shift, so I'm emphasizing how long it was, after each seemingly endless shift, I smelled like a greasy deep fryer. And again, lots of words could go there. After each tiresome shift, I smelled like a disgusting deep fryer. And all of those are great options. So try adding a quality adjective or two to one of your sentences. Number 6, use the words when, while, or where to add some details about what happened. So here my original is, it's true, I hated my very first job, but at least it made my next job seem easy in comparison. So I want to say when. So I'll say, it's true, I hated my first job every day that I worked it. The when is every day, but at least it made my next job seem easy by comparison. So let's have a look. Here's my original paragraph before I revised it. It goes like this. I got my very first job at age 18 and I hated it. I worked at a swimming pool concession. It was a difficult job because there was only one worker at a time and there was a lot to do. Many of my customers were rude, hungry children. After each shift, I smelled like a deep fryer. It's true, I hated my first job, but at least it made my next job seem easy in comparison. So again, we have full sentences, the meaning is clear, so we're looking at probably C plus or B, but then we dress it up. I obtained my very first job at age 18 and I loathed it. I worked arduously at a swimming pool concession. Because there was only one worker at a time, there was a lot of work to do. Many of my customers were rude, hungry children who had been let loose on the swimming pool without adult supervision. After each seemingly endless shift, I smelled like a greasy deep fryer. It's true, I hated my first job every day that I worked it, but at least it made my next job seem easy by comparison. And there we've bumped that B paragraph up to an A. And yeah, they're simple tricks, but when you put it all together, it makes some really great writing. So you guys can go ahead and try to revise your paragraph sentence by sentence, and then write out your good copy. Other questions you can ask yourself: are any of the sentences too similar? So am I beginning the sentence, every sentence, with the word then? For instance, if you're telling a story, sometimes you can get caught in that. Then this happened, then that happened, then this happened. Is there correct spelling, punctuation, and grammar? So again, what we worked on in the last couple weeks, do I have my commas in the right spot? Am I beginning with a capital letter, and am I ending with a period, an exclamation mark, or a question mark? Yep, next, can I add any transition words? Can I add any more details? Is the writing suited to the audience? Does it have a strong beginning and ending? And then finally, what would a good title be? All right, so adding some details. Here's my paragraph. Let's see. I'm going to add a detail to my second sentence because I just said there was a lot of work to do, but that's a little bit vague. So I'm going to list off some of the work that I had to do. And remember, when you're doing a list, you start with a colon, those 2 dots, and then you put a comma between each item on the list. So my second sentence reads, because there was only one worker at a time, there was a lot of work to do. Make specialty coffees, grill burgers, make sandwiches, bake cookies, man the till, do the dishes, and cash out at the end of the day. So that really shows, oh, that is a lot of work for just one person by actually listing it all off. So details are great to add to writing. And then add some transition words. So transition words are words that sort of help us go from one idea to another. So I'm going to add the word worst of all. So I listed all the work I had to do, and then I'm going to say, worst of all, many of my customers were rude, hungry children who had been let loose on the swimming pool without adult supervision. And then finally, we're going to come up with a good title. So it's a good idea to brainstorm some different ideas instead of writing down the first thing that comes to your mind. So here are some ideas. My first job, my first and worst job, a deplorable job, drowning in work, elbow greasy. So I like that elbow greasy one because I talked about how I always felt greasy after working in the deep fryer, and how I had to, it also shows how hard I had to work by using a lot of elbow grease. So I'm going to choose the title elbow greasy. And my full title is Elbow Greasy, the Tale of a Terrible Job. And then here's my final version of that paragraph. I obtained my very first job at age 18 and I loathed it. I worked arduously at a swimming pool concession. Because there was only one worker at a time, there was a lot of work to do. Make specialty coffees, grill burgers, make sandwiches, bake cookies, man the till, do the dishes, and cash out at the end of the day. Worst of all, many of my customers were rude, hungry children who had been let loose on the swimming pool without adult supervision. After each seemingly endless shift, I smelled like a greasy deep fryer. It's true, I hated my first job every day that I worked it, but at least it made my next job seem easy by comparison. And I think we've brought that up to like an A+ level paragraph there. So it's your turn to go try it. And breaking it down into steps like this really makes the revision process a lot more doable. Good luck, everyone.